And I think if you want to compare it to a business model and understand it from where a business owner, a business manager, somebody who handles business, you have to look at this technology in two different ways. And she's like, oh, I still don't understand what you're talking. You're saying so many technical words. Like, can you just put it in plain English?
Today, we're going to be talking about small business tips and the technology behind the Web3 and really kind of how most business owners are probably not embracing this, and that it's very complicated and there's a lot of technical aspect about it, which is why I'm going to be talking today with Mike Newbauer. I'm very excited. And before Mike introduces himself, I have to tell a story about when Mike and I met in Phoenix at the Creator Economy Expo. I was having dinner at the bar by myself. There were 3 cats at the bar and they were talking away. It was all Web3 related. And I'm listening in for about 45 minutes, actively and aggressively eavesdropping on their conversation. And finally, when there was a bit of a pause, I leaned over and I said, hey, can I ask you a couple of questions? And Mike says, before you ask your question, can I ask you a question? I was like, sure. Do you own any NFTs or do you know what an NFT is? So I responded, he was like, oh, okay, you can ask the question. True
I vetted
story.
you out.
Mike is from Ossining, New York, and I'm from Sleepy Hollow, which was the other mind-blowing thing that we found out when we were talking. And Mike now lives in Miami with his wife and his 3-year-old daughter. And there's a little boy on the way.
Yep. Actually, daughter's turning 3 on Christmas Eve. So she's a Christmas baby.
Christmas baby.
Yeah, it was an interesting holiday.
I bet.
But yeah, we got another one on the way due in February. Baby boy, Mike
Do
number 2.
We have names yet?
Yeah, Mike number 2.
Oh, Mike number 2.
Yeah, Michael.
Mike 2.0.
Technically 3. Technically 3. My dad was Michael as well.
Mike 3.
Mike 3.
That's great.
Yeah, so the town of Ossining is actually an offshoot of Briarcliff Manor. I went to St. Teresa's Elementary School.
I know where that is.
Yep, right off of 9A there. And then the funny part, I guess, about the Sleepy Hollow story is, number one, I got taken off that football field in an ambulance. And I was born at Phelps. Oh
my God, so was I. That's so crazy. My mother was a pediatric nurse. What year were you born?
1983.
She was working there. I bet you she was on the floor.
So there was a doctor there by the name of Dr. Nigro, who he didn't deliver me. There was another doctor that delivered, but he was a very close family friend. And that's how they ended up going there to give birth. And in fact, funny story, there was a minor earthquake the minute I was born there, which is weird for New York. But
explains a lot.
I came into the world with a bang. What can I say?
No joke. Oh my gosh. My mom probably knows that doctor too. That's even more. And I kind of knew this story, but I'm learning more. So this is fantastic. You went to Concordia University in Canada and studied, where are my notes? Civil engineering, advanced mathematics.
Yep.
Advanced and business management. Plus, you have 12 years experience working as an operational business consultant, and you're owner of multiple businesses in Florida and Nevada, and you're a Web3 builder. So tell us a little bit about, the background and kind of getting into now with the Web3 technology and business owners.
Dating back, I guess, to the earlier stages of the career, I had a huge interest in engineering. When I was in high school, I did an internship with a company in Manhattan called Siska and Hennessy. They're notorious for, I guess, building out the Macy's building on Fifth Avenue there, or in New York City. I forget where it is. They paid for me in part to go to school up in Canada. Loved engineering, loved everything about it. And then I realized at some point in the educational process that I would actually been landlocked in Canada, because they started teaching me Canadian law and all the requirements that are associated with not just Canada, but the province of Quebec. So I shifted into advanced mathematics. Engineering is a very physics and mathematical discipline anyway. So I kind of had an interest in the mathematical side, wanted to pursue it a little bit more, got a little crazy with derivatives and trying to formulate, and playing mathematician really wasn't my career goal path. So I thought that the universal language was definitely business. And I wanted to understand the intricate workings of business. And lo and behold, fast forward time, 12 plus years, 13 years later, I have been blessed to use all of my education at every stage of my career. So operational business management, operational business consulting, just kind of fell into that role. One of the things that I appreciated about business was all the various elements that it involves: marketing, sales, infrastructure, supply chains, logistics, legal, compliance, all of it. I really took the time to understand each of those elements in various stages of my career. I've done all sorts of crazy things. I've done a lot of manufacturing in the dietary supplement nutraceutical space. We've manufactured capsules, tablets, powders, bars, chewing gums, beverages,
Wow.
everything under the sun. So we were in the process of writing SOPs, the standard operating procedures that are compliant with the FDA. We did labeling. We did also containers. I've run a company successfully through the Chapter 11 process. So I got a crash course in the whole legal and regulatory efforts, along with investors. Been all over the place. But about 7 years ago, John Briggs, who owns Food Fight Studios, he and I started working together on just a project to help us better understand e-commerce, right? That was the whole purpose of the project. We decided that we wanted to have a little fun with it. We're both big sports guys. He was actually a friend of my friend from college. So he used to come up and hang out in Montreal all the time. And we just kind of stayed friends over the past 20 years. He lived in Florida. When I moved to Florida, we just kind of reconnected, and we took on the opportunity to learn this e-commerce space together, built out some of these parody sports logos, and tried to start selling them on t-shirts, which you're wearing one now.
I'm wearing one now. It says absorbs tears. I got to stand up. Can you? No, you can't see it.
Yep.
Yeah, absorbs tears. All 32 NFL teams have a parody logo that you guys created. Is so fantastic. We'll get into that on fantasy football project.
So mind you, just keep the timeline in mind, because that was 7 years ago now, right?
7 years.
7 years ago, we developed the whole concept of the logos and things like that. And then after a while, we just really wanted to understand Facebook marketing, Instagram marketing, building your audiences with either paid advertising or engagement posts and, polls and surveys and questionnaires. And, we built the whole thing up to an email list of about 15,000 people. It was pretty significant.
Wow.
And then, fast forward time, other projects started to surface. Food Fight Studios became a major player in the animation space. They started, getting nominated and winning some pretty significant awards. I think they got nominated for a couple Emmys. A couple of their producers won Emmys. In the animation side, they've done work with Wyclef John. They've done work with James Altucher, Gary Vaynerchuk, all these major players in the influencer space. Jesse Itzler, Mark Schaefer. They've done a lot of work with a lot of those guys. So I want to say it's about 10 months ago, or maybe it's a little longer, but an opportunity came about to jump into the Web3 space. Now, just like everybody else, we heard about this, but right.
Yeah.
There was that whole hesitation component because nobody really understood where this was going. One of the phrases that I absolutely hate, but it gets thrown around and people kind of get it right away, is that it was the wild, wild west and there was no real regulation. And, there was a lot of things that could ultimately go wrong. So why are you going to invest your time and your money into it? So
was it dubbed Web3 at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
The whole blockchain technology is what interested me from the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah.
Like when we got introduced to it, as opposed to somebody like John, who is more versed into the marketing and the branding component. And he recognized that working with rock solid people in a project called the Battle Bunnies, who are a husband and wife tattoo artist who built out this whole world about, and this whole storyline about these magical bunnies that live on this island that end up fighting each other. John saw it as an opportunity to expand on the story component, using the animation, using the storytelling, using all of the branding efforts that he has built up in his career. And I kind of came in as kind of the engine under the hood, right? Just making sure that all the parts were in place and that all the elements were working, in sync. And ultimately, we successfully launched that project over a 3-month period. And then we just continuously kept building and building and building and building. And before you know it, we started uncovering and peeling back the layers of what this technology truly is, how it could be utilized, and more importantly, how we can start explaining it to a variety of people that are still on that bubble, whether it be individuals, whether it be businesses. There's a massive barrier to entry still. I think that one of our goals over the better part of this past year was to try to understand those barriers and try to figure out solutions on how to knock them down in the easiest capacity.
This probably brings up the question, what about Web3 excited you the most? Which it sounds like for you, it was the blockchain technology, which obviously then allows and introduces the mathematics and all the that stuff that most people don't like, the engineering and the developing part of it. John and Frank and Krista, I know them, and I'm a Bunnies holder, so I do know them, and they're hilarious, by the way, on your Trash Talk Tuesday show. But it was a really nice marriage, it sounds like, of everybody's skills and strengths.
It was extremely complimentary. I mean, the way that those guys are able to create art is mind numbing to me. Like, I would never in a million years be able to do that. And again, I'm a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of guy, right? They're able to visualize what, the art looks like before it's completed, and then go through various sketches in order to perfect it. But cool things that I got to experience in working on this project with them is that Frank does these live drawings. So it's not like he sits in a dark room by himself and comes up with this stuff. Like, he actually opens up his portfolio to be able to view him throughout the creative process.
Oh, wow.
And
that's cool.
it's, he does these drink and draws on Fridays with the community. The community loves it. They want to try to replicate it. Some people went out and they bought the technology themselves so they can start to understand how they can create that kind of art as well. But one of the unique components about it is that as you watch this, and as he gets to the tail end of the piece that he's drawing, there's at least 50 to 60 times where I would have said, pencils down, this is done, this is perfect the way it is.
Really?
And he'll add other elements to it afterwards that just make it that much better. And I think when you take that much detail into something, and when you really believe in what you're building from there, from somebody who doesn't have that skill set, you want to do what you bring to the table even better, because you want to complement that more. So to answer your question, yes, it's a big group of everybody that can bring something to the table that's very unique, but we also motivate each other in different ways as well.
I love the interdependence aspect of that story that you just shared, because it really is how things can come to fruition without a lot of stress, because everyone is in their lane and they know what to do and how to apply what they do best. And then it complements everybody in the group of whatever you're trying to execute. And especially when it comes to creativity and art, the abstract thinking married with the linear thinking, there's so much possibility there.
Tons.
Yeah.
And again, from like to answer your question a little bit more specifically, like, as an engineer mindset, I like to see a problem or a situation and try to resolve it or come up with an easier solution for that problem, right? So when we walked into this, there's a million questions that we had, right? I mean, this is an investment of time, an investment of money, personnel, resources. There was a lot of questions that we had that nobody really had answers for, except for people who had been in the space for a couple months that were self-proclaimed experts, which I'll get to a little bit later, because I hate the fact that has stuck with so many people in this space. Nobody's an expert. It's just too new, right? Everybody's learning on the fly. And if somebody sits there and tells you that they are the best and that they are the number one in this particular area, in this space, that should pop a red flag for you. You need to keep an open mind that this is an ever evolving technology. The foundation of it is there. If you understand the structure, that allows you to go out and therefore call people out for some of the things that are not accurate, that based on certain things, right? So this is really what I wanted to focus on as part of a conversation like this, because we talk about business, we talk about all the various elements that a business can use this technology for, who's hesitant, why, what benefits there are. I think we need to take a step back. This technology offers something that is not new. I think that's important to understand first. All the elements that are associated with this technology to this point have been done before. It's just offering that same element in a new technology. And that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it exciting. That's what makes it different. But it also makes it a little nerve-wracking, because you're using different terminology. You're targeting people differently. And there's different elements that users are required to have in order to properly interact with the technology. These are the barriers to entry that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you for clarifying that, because, and I don't know if this is a good time to interject with either an example specifically, like, is it because it's blockchain and then crypto's involved?
I've used this example on a couple of these types of conversations. Until it gets to the point where somebody can hit a button on their phone and it makes them waffles, the technology will never truly be accepted by everybody. Right? Think about the evolution of a lot of these things. Facebook is a good example. Facebook for a while didn't have an app on a phone because smartphones weren't either in existence or they weren't as popular as they were today. So if I were in college or if I were in high school and I wanted to say, hey, I'm going to the mall, I used to have to run to my computer, turn it on, set up my dial-up internet, pull up Facebook, say, hey, I'm going to the mall, check you later, leave, go away, have no idea who interacted with that post until I got back home. And then all of a sudden, a smartphone came about. And
Yeah.
then the ability to post while I'm in the car on the way or on the bus or walking in the I can do these things now on the fly. I couldn't even tell you the first one that I had. I think I had a BlackBerry, if that counts as one.
I know somebody who had, and I remember having lunch with him in Sleepy Hollow, and he was like, "I got my first iPhone." I'm like, "What the heck is that? You know, the buttons are on the screen."
Yeah, you're gonna try. You don't want an actual button you have to press. You're actually
Yeah.
gonna like what happens in your pocket. So many questions on this new technology that
Mhm.
ultimately evolved to a place where nobody can leave home without it now. I challenge anybody, leave your phone at home and go away for the weekend and see what kind of anxiety you're dealing with.
Yeah,
That's the
it's
point of
true.
evolution where this technology has really taken over. I don't want to compare the two because that looks at it in a very negative light, but I think that with the advancement of the technology with blockchain, with the understanding of what blockchain technology truly offers, and again, we're talking about for the good. There's a lot of bad people out there that are casting black eyes on the entire industry, and we'll get into some of those in a second, but I
Mhm.
think that those elements do not define the industry. And it's
Okay.
important to make that distinction because there's so many great elements to this technology, and most of it has yet to be truly understood. And from a business perspective, one of my main focuses over the past several months in understanding where this technology is going to go is making sure that businesses understand the value that it will bring over time. And if you're an early adopter into the technology as a business, that is going to solve several things for the space in its entirety. Number one, it proves that businesses can thrive using this technology. Number two, it also assists with onboarding existing clients that maybe would not have been onboarded at that time to begin with.
Mhm.
I'll use an example with a big company like Nike. If
Mhm.
Nike comes out and says, "Hey, we're building out this collection on the blockchain," there's people that maybe have heard of NFTs, big Nike fans, shoe collectors. Hey, you know what? I'm going to check this out now. What do I have to do? They go through the onboarding steps that Nike invested in, the
Mhm.
educational components that are available, and they say, "Okay, I'm going to create a digital wallet. I'm going to figure out a way to set up some sort of an exchange where I can bridge my fiat cash into this crypto." Or there's technologies out there now that are incorporating credit card transactions into the same system.
Mhm.
So again, all these advancements in the technology now makes my experience as the user a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more user friendly, I guess you could
User
say.
friendly, yeah. To be able to do that with a credit card when you're buying something that's on the blockchain, that's new too, right? You're the only one I think that I know that did it with a project with the unfantasy football.
We use the Web 2, Web 3 integration on that. It's not entirely Web 3. And I don't think it's possible to do an entire Web 3 interface with a credit card at this moment. It's kind of a mask, right? It's no different from you going to buy a refrigerator and putting it on your credit card. The
Right.
reality is you don't own that, right? Like you did not pay for that. You put it as a credit. Technically, the
Yes.
credit card company is fronting that money to the vendor, and then you are now responsible for paying that credit card company. So my question to you is, in a technology like this, with where assets are deposited on a one-way street into a wallet,
Mhm.
what happens if you don't pay that credit card bill? What
Right.
happens to that asset? Does it get revoked? How? Right? Like these are
Yeah.
all questions that come into play. So for example, what we did on the Unfantasy project was we set up a very standard e-commerce solution store. We listed all of the digital assets as digital assets that you can purchase on the store, no web3 integration whatsoever, and we also made those assets available on the blockchain. So technically the same assets are available for sale in two locations. And if somebody purchases them
Oh,
on one
right.
location, there it's removed from the other location.
But how does that person know to that they own that digital asset? How do they access it?
Okay, so the items for sale in that particular project are already minted, right? So
That's right.
that's an important distinction, right? So you
Mhm.
can't go to purchase an unfanned playing card with a credit card that has yet to be minted. The only
Ah.
way to do that would be to basically prepay for it and then we mint it to your wallet in whatever sequential order is next. The way
Okay.
that we have it set up is those tokens are already minted from the contract. They're
Mhm.
sitting in a free agency wallet, which is
Yep.
essentially just a wallet that we designate certain playing cards for sale week to week. And if you wanted to purchase that, if you wanted to go the route of the credit card, you would go to our website, unfan.xyz. You would click on the free agency. You would select the card you want. You would complete the transaction. As soon as the transaction is cleared, that asset is then sent to your digital wallet.
Well, does everyone have a digital wallet even if they pay with credit card?
They don't. And that's one of the unique components about this project too, right? Like I would argue that 60% plus of the people that are in this project, there's 67 owners of unfantasy football teams. So to be clear, it's a fantasy football project.
But
We changed the rules around a little bit, but the art is associated. It's actually the same art that we discussed earlier with the parody tees 7 years ago. It's always good, clean fun, and that was the whole purpose of it. Of those 67 owners, about 60% of them did not have any inclination or understanding of Web3. This whole project was a test dummy. It was a pilot. We wanted to test out so many different elements. Number one, the Web 2, Web 3 integration, which we just discussed. Number two, we also wanted to use it as a lily pad. Basically an onboarding process for people that have no clue what Web3 is. But hey, like Mike and John, what are you guys up to nowadays? You guys are always into some innovative stuff. We can explain it and we can get them in on it. John's aunt, his uncle, a bunch of my friends that have no idea what Web3 is, they were able to onboard themselves. We explained the process of setting up the wallet. We then took the assets and we transferred that to them as their first NFTs that they hold within their wallet. But there are some people that are just like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with Web3, but I still want to support the project. I love fantasy football. I love the concept of the game. How can I still play? We use the blockchain as essentially a backup to the entire league. And again, we have to remember what a blockchain is, right? A blockchain is just a series of sequential transactions. That's all it is. It's in its simplest, rawest form. Forget about apes, forget about monkeys, forget about, crypto, whatever. It's just a series of sequential transactions. So what we did was we took those transactions and we backed it up on the blockchain, even for people that do not have digital wallets or have no inclination to try it. So what we did was we set up a secured wallet using a ledger on our account. We called it the Unfantasy Locker. And in that locker is where we're storing those digital assets for the people that don't have a wallet. So,
okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but two distinctions. The free agency, that's how you mint, but the locker is where they're deposited. Is that correct? No.
Not really. So
Okay.
there's two separate wallets that are set up by Unfantasy, right? So you have the free agency wallet and then you have the locker. Okay. So the free agency wallet acts as whatever cards are available on a week-to-week basis for owners to go and improve their lineups.
Yes.
So there's certain cards that are put in there that are released every week in the respective scoring categories. Owners can then go in and they can purchase whatever one that they want for that given week. Maybe their team is on a bye. They need to replace the starting position. Maybe it's a good matchup. There's those cards available. That's all in the free agency pool. That free agency pool is linked to the Web 2 solution we discussed earlier. The storage locker is basically it's like a holding wallet for people that are not integrated into Web 3 yet. So for example, if one of my friends who does not have a digital wallet, he hasn't had time to set it up, his assets right now are stored in that storage wallet. 2 years, 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 hours from now, if he calls me up and says, hey, I finally got a MetaMask, here's my wallet address. Now I can take those assets that we secured on the blockchain and we can deposit them in his wallet because he's owned them the whole time. He's been a part of the league.
And how do you distinguish the cards associated if they're in one place? I mean, you have it on an Excel spreadsheet or?
Yeah. So if you, and maybe I could share my screen here.
So for the listeners who are not accessing this podcast via video, Mike is showing us the Unfantasy Football website in OpenSea.
Yep. This is the playing card collection, right? So there's two collections. There's the owner's pass collection, and then there's the playing card collection. So as you can see, there's two separate wallets. One is called free agency and the other is called the storage locker. So in the storage locker, we actually have the ability to separate the assets based on the team.
That's really smart. Okay. So you organized it because OpenSea allows you to do that though, right?
Yeah, so these are called featured collections, right? So if you go to any particular wallet, well, I can actually show it in the free agency wallet. So in the free agency wallet, the featured collections are updated every week with respect to which free agent tokens are available, right? So this week, these are the offensive tokens that are available in the free agency pool. So you can see it's organized by offense, defense, special teams, penalties, or that win-loss card.
The fact that you can buy a playing card when you're seeing who's playing and things start, because now we're more than halfway through the season, right? You go in and it's like, Steelers are playing the Colts, and I have both win-loss scoring category for both those teams. And I'm like, I don't even know. This is a tough one. So maybe if I wanted to, knowing that maybe the Texans are going to lose, I want to go get a Texans win-loss. You can do that.
Correct.
And that's the only reason for me that I think is the only reason why I'm still at the top, because I did get other cards of other teams in other scoring categories.
You've been extremely active in the league. In fact, the league would not be as successful or as fun without your involvement. So you are a monument in the inaugural season for this, and thank you for that. But the ability to pick up cards on the blockchain in this free agency pool, the ability to buy and sell, or simply even trade, I think you kind of got the better end of a couple deals that you and I worked out. Where we would just trade those assets back and forth.
Yeah, I think you were being nice, but I also have literally the playing cards number 1 through 5, and I gave up my 3, and I was like, I want my 3 back, even though the team isn't the top of the penalties category. So I know we kind of got off on a tangent about unfantasy, but I think it was worthy because this doesn't have to be slimy crypto conversations. It is actually a practical application of how things can work within a group or a community or a membership, or, of having access to people, professionals, and tools, essentially, right?
You just hit it. You just said the key word there, right? It is a tool. And if this project taught us anything, right, it's that the blockchain tool, the NFT tool, is secondary to what is actually behind the project, right? If we just went out and said we had an NFT collection, probably wouldn't have gained interest, probably would not have people been involved for, football season's a long season. That's a lot of engagement that's required from people week after week, checking lineups, setting lineups, who's on a buy, who's not. This is not anything new with fantasy, but the fantasy element of it is the nucleus. The NFT component is a tool of that nucleus. And I think if you want to compare it to a business model and understand it from where a business owner, a business manager, somebody who handles business, you have to look at this technology in 2 different ways. Number 1, it is a revenue generating marketing tool. And there's so many ways. That's a very broad explanation, but I think that's a way that you can explain it in a way so that anybody who's at any various element of a business, whether they're an entrepreneur, content creator, any of that, you can now use this marketing tool as a revenue source. That's one element of it. And I think from a business perspective, the most underutilized element, and I have an enormous amount of examples on this, is using it as a B2B collaboration tool. Ooh. And I think that is really one of the things, especially in today's technology and today's day and age, where people are glued to their phones, glued to their computers. There's more of an isolated feel over the last couple of years with COVID and way businesses are run remotely now. This is a very exciting way for us to be able to showcase a technology, incorporate a B2B collaboration, which creates some sense of partnership, but it also expands a targeted audience to target the collaborators' audience as well. I'll give a very practical example of this. I own a gym. I don't, but let's just say hypothetically I do. If I owned a gym and next door you owned a nutrition shop, I can offer my clients the ability to hold a membership to my gym by holding an NFT. Then I can go to you.
Did you watch the interview I did last week?
I did not.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, you have to watch it. Heather from Coin Queens, which when I get into my next question, the lead into the question is the interview that I had with her last week. She used a gym membership as an example for an NFT as well.
It's one of those I chat even at CEX. I almost called it SEX, but I think that's your joke. Yeah, so at CEX, I was actually asking people and challenging them like, okay, well, what business do you know? What are your clients in? And I'll come up with a use case for an NFT for that business. Yeah, and I had people come up to me like, okay, well, one of my clients is a plumber. Like, what the hell is a plumber going to do with an NFT? And I'm like, well, it's pretty simple. Like, if you're a local plumber and you want to go around and you want to offer this type of membership to your loyal customers, maybe if you have this NFT, you get a free inspection every year. Maybe it gets them into, like, there's these marketing tools that are associated with this, but here's the unique component of it behind the scenes, right? Like, if their customer no longer requires their service, like I'm moving out of town, I'm going to an area you don't service anymore, they can either turn around and sell that asset back to the business at a profit, potentially, depending on the way the market is, or they can sell it to the new owner. So that asset is an owned asset by the customer that could be benefited by the business.
You bring up a good point that I think what people are missing is thinking through what already exists that is being done. Again, the conversation we had last week was when value packs were being mailed around. That didn't exist at one point, or coupons in the flyer of a newspaper kind of thing.
The gym and the nutrition shop is a great example because they typically go hand in hand and people can visualize it right away. But
Yeah.
if my clients have an NFT as a membership, I can go to the local nutrition store and say, hey, look, we're going to promote you guys. I have an NFT as a membership to my gym. If somebody comes in with this NFT, maybe they get X, Y, and Z. And in return, people come to us from you. They will be gifted this NFT, which then gets them back to your store to capitalize on those discounts. It's a one hand washes the other. It's a shared traffic effort, right? But think about it on a much larger scale. That's a very micro example, but on a much larger scale, if Coke created an NFT and Pepsi created an NFT and they created a collaborative marketing venture, now you can create an element where the content is created by the consumer, it's consumed by the consumer, the value of the NFTs fluctuate, and it creates an entire marketing campaign that can technically compete with each other.
That's right.
Coke will use Pepsi, Pepsi will use Coke. The NFTs will be the conjoining variable that is really combines the whole concept of the project. And in the end of the day, both companies win. They both get to tap into each other's markets. It's a different way to look at marketing. It's a different way to look at collaborations. And I think that's really one of the hesitations that a lot of these companies have, is the control element that they don't truly understand.
Since we're talking about collaborations and executing on a project, when I talked last week with Heather, she said, most of these PFP projects aren't executed well. PFP stands for profile picture, even though it's not PP. It's PFP. But that's a term that's used for the type of project. And basically, it's art that people use for their profile picture on social media sites.
No, it's important. We get caught up in the weeds here. We forget that there's a lot of acronyms that a lot of people might not be used to. And that's another thing that might scare people away. But at the end of the day, it's all terms that we know well and dear, right? Profile pictures are nothing new to our existence with social media.
Some of these projects get a lot of attention. They are very popular and are priced as such that it's very expensive to get to buy an NFT from these projects. And Heather was like, yeah, but I don't think they're executed well. And I would like to know from you as a developer and an engineer that really the specialty for you is executing on the blockchain and making these branding components available. What do you think business owners, how can they make the most out of the technology when they're thinking about the collab or a membership pass to access to a service?
I think you're touching on a couple important points, but they have to somewhat remain separate, right? So the technology side of things is more of the infrastructure. So even the PFP projects, the business projects, the art projects, the gaming projects, they all have a very common element within the technology, right? It's blockchain technology. So you're creating a smart contract, you're deploying that smart contract, and from that smart contract, you're extracting tokens. Versus the branding side, which is really a marketing play. And this is where I think your question really falls in line, because the entire concept, and this is really what almost scared me away from the industry at the beginning, the concept of this FOMO, which another acronym, right? Fear of missing out, and all of this hype and all of this understanding of human emotion that's involved with the purchase process. It's all predicated on hot air. So I use the example of a balloon. If I take a balloon and I show it deflated, it's a very small balloon. But if I start blowing hot air into that balloon, it starts to expand and it gets bigger and bigger. Think of that as the NFT hype and FOMO getting bigger and bigger. And before you know it, you have this entire project with all of this money that came in, sold out in 5 minutes. We made $15 million in ETH and all of this craziness that you hear. And all it is based around the hot air within this balloon. And over time, that hot air is going to evaporate, which means that the project is going to go down. People's investments are going to go with it. And therefore, you see these failures happen within projects like this. And, we talk about the state of the industry, the state of the crypto space, and some of the other issues that have happened around the space that have just added and compiled the reason why we're in this quote unquote crypto winter. I think this was a really good thing for the industry.
With the FTX and rally and all?
I would date it back a little bit towards more like June.
Yeah,
so when things started to slide down from there, we really got an opportunity to weed out a lot of these hot air type projects, right? So, and it's one of our chest up, chin high moments with a project like the Battle Bunnies because that community is built on a rock solid foundation. There are people there that hang out every day, every week. They do all these things together. They actually meet up in person. There is a real legit community built around that project. And wherever the industry goes, wherever the current state of the economics of it ends up, they are associated with that community. And that is why it is thriving today. It did not have that FOMO. It did not have that hot air. We will make good on it. These are the types of people involved with the project. This is what we have to offer. We want you to be welcomed into this community, into this family. That was the mindset from the beginning. If this went a route of this hype and FOMO, we would have walked away, because that is a house of cards. It is an unsustainable business model. And that's the way that a lot of people are not interpreting these projects, right? It is a legitimate business, and you have to treat it as such.
Well, that's also with the Battle Bunnies and the team there. You know, you guys had a long-term vision. And so it wasn't just to pump your ETH wallet or whatever. It was to build around developing a community. And also because Frank, as the artist, he's not one and done. Like, he's going to keep creating. Why would you shit on your community with the hype and the FOMO and the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt? Why would you do that? You're never going to regain any credibility or trust. And that's business. That's a business mindset, like you said.
And they're both very successful business entrepreneurs themselves. They have tattoo shops that are very successful. Frank's been all over the world. He's spoken at conferences. He's been flown into all these various areas. He's a very well-known person in that particular community, and he's very well respected for the type of person that he is. Forget about the great art he does, but the personality that he and his wife, Krista, bring to the table are well above and beyond most projects that are out there. In fact, most projects that are out there, you won't even hear from the artists like that. Right. Like, they are almost kind of my job is done. Now it's just the marketers team to keep the community engaged. No, they are in there day after day, night after night, meeting up with these people, really just finding unique, cool, different ways to engage with the community, because they've turned it into their family. It's a business. At the end of the day, all the money that's been brought in has been put right back into the project to make it better. Now we have an audio book for a first ever community written NFT novel that's been published. We have an audio book that's coming out. We have the hard copy that's coming out. We just launched merch on the new website that was built for them.
Ooh, there's a whole gotta love me some merch. If you do look up the Battle Bunnies project and you find Frank, if you had a blindfolded test taste, you would not know that his voice is not Gary V. It is so uncanny. They were like, if I had a dime every single time, I'd have as much money as Gary V, because everybody says it.
At the beginning of this, that's what, unfortunately, a lot of people were, jumping in on the project about, because we got called by a couple alphas back then, and that, all those weird communities, and not weird in the sense that they're bad people. It's just that they clearly expect certain things from projects with respect to investment purposes. And we just didn't want that. We wanted the community building
and control. Because then you lose control, because then they're pressuring you to do things because there's that expectation of how much money to make.
And that's where the technology side of this whole thing really came around full circle for us. Right. We did not want those restrictions that was demanded. And that's where we sought out the ability to take the handcuffs off on these certain perimeters that typically would be in place on a project. Right. So you want to launch a project, you want to create X amount of art pieces. That's great. But what happens if the market tanks and nobody decides they want to buy in? Now you're stuck with that. That shouldn't be the case. You should be able, as a business owner, to pivot with the times. That's what makes a successful business. I mean, think about everything that happened in 2020. The businesses that stayed on track and thought that this was going to be over in 15 days to slow the spread, maybe they're out of business right now. But the ones that actually took the opportunity to pivot and point their business in the direction that they saw was consistent with the times, they're the ones that survived and potentially are thriving at this point.
You're bringing up a good point that it is a business, and it's not just like, oh, I'm going to do a digital art project and, mint on the blockchain and all the things that go along with it.
I just think that stories like this are going to continue to surface, especially when they involve high profile people, high profile politics, high profile, and ton of money. I mean, let's not forget about the quantitative value in this as well. There's a lot of people that are going to have their various opinions based on something like this occurring. And, my response to that is that it is not this particular scenario and the future ones that are yet to be uncovered. They are not the definition of where we're at with this. I can say that as somebody who deals with it on a day-to-day basis in the weeds, tries to stay on top of all the continuous trends, all the advancements in the technology. We are moving this process in the right direction. And unfortunately, with any new technology, there's always going to be people that try to figure out a way to use it to exploit people for their own personal gain. That's nothing new. I mean, we saw that happen with Facebook. We saw that happen with Instagram. We saw that happen with e-commerce, before internet days, before websites. I mean, I remember as a kid being terrified to put a credit card into a website because you never know where it's going to go. And then like all of a sudden now every website I go to has a lot more of my information than I ever thought I would ever allow. That's because the trust in the technology and just the convenience of it was worth that particular risk. If we can just use these as examples of things to educate us on what to look out for in the marketplaces, we're going to be in a much better position. With that being said, and I'm probably going to say something that you or your listeners might not necessarily agree with, again, I think that something like this is grounds to have some sense of regulation. Let's create a boundary that we all have to abide by.
I haven't seen anyone dismiss that as outright rubbish. I think that's why regulation exists, because somebody was exploiting. There were grave deficiencies perpetrated against people. And that's why then regulation exists. All the crazy people got away with it. And then people were like, that's enough. Obviously, there are going to be people that disagree with you, but
it's a DeFi technology, right? The whole concept was to not have this central governing force that, if there's this opportunity for us to create this without the intermediaries, we can now exploit this technology in an effort to do that, which is great. And there's still ways to do that, right? Mm-hmm. There's totally ways that you can still do that today. But what I think needs to happen is that for FTX, for example, FTX is an exchange. They are linking themselves to people's hard cash wallets in an effort to transfer those assets into this crypto world, which fine. But those types of organizations should be bound by certain regulations. That's should have a certain process that goes into them being in existence and then operating in existence, just like a bank does. You and I can pull our resources and start a bank tomorrow, but it doesn't mean that there's not processes and regulations that we have to abide by.
1,000%. And the other thing too that I heard someone say on a Twitter Spaces, this is not a crypto problem. This is a human greed problem. This is a people problem. But if you're not really aware or you're not versed in a space or a situation or something new in the technology, everything's going to seem like scammy and criminal based and all of that. And which is one of the reasons why Trevor. So first of all, Trevor was the biggest skeptic of them all. Now he's the biggest fan of the project we're doing together and getting involved with hearing and listening and learning. He said, don't forget, you got to ask Mike, and this has to be your question now whenever you interview anybody that's Web3, what's the scariest thing about Web3 today? Which you kind of touched on everything before I even presented my questions.
You sent them to me before. I'm sorry. I had to review them and prepare, and I got excited. I jumped the gun a little bit. But I think there needs to be a fine line, and Trevor will probably appreciate this little rant, but there needs to be a clearer definition on what's scary versus what's anticipation. I think that we're in a technology and a stage of the technology where the anticipation level of trying to understand what's next, what should be next, and where things can ultimately end up isn't necessarily fear. Now, the easy answer to all of this that you hear 9 times out of 10 on every article, every podcast, every Twitter Spaces, every presentation that you get yourself into on a Web3 is the DYOR, do your own research. Mm-hmm. Well, what the hell does that mean? There is no encyclopedia. There's no volume. There's no library for me to go and search.
People don't even know what to ask or what they don't know to know.
And it's a lot of self-proclaimed experts that have very minimal experience, that don't have a true understanding of the technology or its capabilities. Myself included, by the way, I don't understand all the elements of this. I know by jumping into the deep end, and I test things out. And if they don't work, I try to understand why. And therefore, when I try to uncover things, it leads to other things that I didn't know were possible before. And then I circle back to say, okay, well, I had this issue on this project in this capacity. Like, what could I do to fix this? So the do your own research, the scary component of it. I think that the anticipation level is more of an accurate way to look at this, because with the anticipation, you're actually looking forward to the solution. You're looking forward to see where this technology goes. One of the really cool stories, and I have two stories I want to tell before we end this for sure, but one of them involves actually the Battle Bunny project, believe it or not. We migrated one of the contracts to another contract and redeployed it. In the process of doing that, one of our community members got their NFT stolen. Okay. They went to Twitter, they clicked on the wrong link, they didn't understand, they broke into their wallet and they clicked the wrong link, authorized them to remove the item. That NFT disappeared. I want to share my screen once again because I want to show you what we were able to do in that particular case. There was a lot of verification that went into this process. It's not like we jumped the gun and just kind of like did this on a whim, right? I'm going to share that. There we go. Okay, so this is the Battle Bunnies OpenSea page, right? It shows the entire collection. There's 1,800 NFTs in this series 1. And again, just to kind of recap, the individual, the community member reached out to us and said, you know, look, I was in the process of doing something. I clicked on the wrong link. I got scammed. I thought I was doing something good. Somebody was asking me for something. They ended up stealing my bunny. So we went in, we verified everything, which again is the advantage of the blockchain, right? Like we can look up the transactions on the blockchain and verify it all.
Doesn't lie.
It's all crystal clear. You want to talk about a lot of traits. Look at all the traits that the Battle Bunnies have. They have over 489 traits. It's insane.
489. Wow.
All hand drawn. All of those calculate itself into a rarity score based on the entirety of the collection, right? So like there could be swords that are rarer than other shields, for example. With the fact that this NFT got stolen, it put a lot of those rarities into jeopardy, because now you have this token that's sitting on the blockchain as part of this collection that does not belong to that community member. So we had to think of a solution, and we thought of it pretty quickly after we verified everything. We went into the token that was stolen and we flagged it. We changed the art on the NFT on the chain. We flagged the NFT. We removed the metadata so that this individual who stole it has absolutely no basis to sell this again. We then went back to the records and found out which one he got stolen. And you can see there's 1,809 in the collection. Token number 1,809 is the one that we recreated for him with the exact same attributes, with the exact same art. So let's talk about and I really want to kind of segue this into the whole question that Trevor made you ask. You know, in a scenario like this, traditionally, if you had assets that were stolen, they were gone forever. You didn't have any ability to get it back. Now, theoretically, that token is gone, but it's not necessarily the token that was important in this particular case. It was the assets that that individual had associated with the token. So as the contract owner, as the project organizer, as the community ourselves, we were eligible to go in, mint a new token, assign that token with all of the attributes and traits and art that that individual had stolen from him, and return that to his wallet. So the reality is that maybe the token number isn't the same, but everything else is exactly the same.
What was the number again that was stolen that you flagged it with new art?
1655, I believe.
Okay, so 1655. And you couldn't burn it either.
Once the token is minted and it's deposited into somebody else's wallet, that individual has to authorize the release of that from the wallet. That's the kind of the fraudulent click.
Just to clarify, when you burn an NFT, doesn't exist ever again. You can't get it back, right?
Correct. You basically eliminate it from the contract. Depending on the way that the contract is written, this is really the important thing. But typically, the owner of that token is the only one who should be able to burn that token, right? So I wouldn't be able, as a contract owner, to burn a token that somebody mints from my contract, because that really defeats the whole decentralization component of the technology. We have a workaround here. So there's so many scenarios across all of these various projects where people get their NFTs stolen. And there's people out there that fish for those opportunities, right? They try to take advantage of people who are still learning the space. I'm guilty of being a victim at some capacity. Like I've gotten NFTs stolen. I've gotten ETH taken from me because I've clicked on the wrong thing. I didn't go through the necessary security protocols that ensured that my digital assets and my crypto was secured. So that's on me. I take full responsibility. And besides, there's no 1-800-HELP-ME number that you can call if in the event that happens. But I think one of the cool things that we introduced introduced with this solution is that a community can literally take extra steps,
Yeah.
go beyond what normally is the norm in this particular industry and make it right. Make it right for not only the individual, the victim who got stolen, but ensure that the person who did the theft is unable to capitalize on that.
That is unbelievable. That is an incredible story. Is there some limitations with what is it? Generative art. I can't ever say that. Generative art.
It really all depends on how the contract is written. And again, I think these are some of the things that we've kind of unearthed over the last 6 months or so. Having a defined quantity at the front end is not necessarily as important anymore. You can have what's called an open-ended contract. So for the Battle Bunnies, for example, we migrated all of the Series 1 assets to this new technology platform, which is open-ended. For example, on Halloween, Frank and Krista decided that they wanted to throw together a whole different sub-collection of art, and they wanted to incorporate it under the same contract. So we were able to then import those tokens, open up the mint again, and then have the users come in and mint those tokens. And it's a completely different set of art.
But it's the same contract, which I think that's what people were beholden to, the contract.
I mean, let's not forget something, because again, you and I are in the weeds on this day after day, right? Like we see these things, we hear these things, but the truth is that this is still extremely new. And even at CEX last year, where we're able to sit down with people that are hearing this for not necessarily the first time, but being introduced to it in this capacity at such a large scale, you can sense that there's certain things that they're just not comfortable with, that they don't truly understand the step-by-steps on how it works, right? So when you develop a contract in the before time, right? Because we'll call the CEX the before time.
Right.
When you write a smart contract, there were certain things that you were bound by. And once it's deployed to the blockchain, there are certain functions that you just don't have the ability to modify. And as a business individual, as an engineer, as somebody who has the mindset of, well, I like options because I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. If the whole industry collapses, I don't want my project to go down with it. I want the ability to pivot and maneuver it so that it still works in the best interest of our community. The only way to do that is to have these options on the table. So things like price, things like this allow list, and having the ability to add people to it and open up the mint and close the mint and change the assets and figure out a way to add tokens later on. All of these are options that we definitely like and we want to maneuver with. And we found some really awesome use cases to make that work. So, like the owner's pass on the Unfantasy League, right? We were able to change the title of the NFT to everybody's team name.
Yeah,
which was really cool. It goes a long way for the community, right?
Part of the reason it clicked for me with the light bulb moment, I think you can take this whole membership access, what was Patreon? And that didn't exist at one point. That's not even that old, right? That's kind of new. All of a sudden that's a new platform where you get special access to them as a creator. At one point that didn't exist either. So there is an aspect of being open to learning to also managing the learning curve. It's an extraordinary amount of effort to flatten the learning curve, especially when it comes to technology. And I think you just have to balance it with talking to people, learning about how does this apply to me? How can I generate revenue if that's a goal? It's a balance.
One of the most common questions that I get all the time is, what is an NFT? What is it? And I'm going to quote John, because John is very good at understanding all of these various scenarios in the dust storm and figuring out a way to simplify it so that he can explain it to his kids, right? Like that's his goal on all these things. So the way that he describes it is, it's not what it is, it's what it can be. Now you're opening up a whole different dynamic where, well, what do you mean? What can it be? It could be whatever you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
It could be genuinely reflective of a reward system. It could be an access channel. It could be a membership. It could be an investment tool. It could be so many different things. That is something that I think if there's a clearer understanding to it, more and more people would be adopted to the technology. And I got to tell you this story. It happened at CEX. Okay. So it was the last day of the event. I was taking the red eye from Phoenix back to Miami. And, I was at the bar just like we were, and we had our assigned seats at some point towards the tail end of the event. We're just watching I think it was the NHL playoffs, and we're watching the game, and John and I were there. John was staying an extra day. GI was there. We were all just hanging out. There was this other lady there who was probably in her mid-20s. We start talking, and she's like, hey, what are you guys here for? And we're like, oh, we're here for this, Creator Economy Expo, heavy emphasis on Web3 technology. It was a great event. Met some super awesome people. It was great. Like, we just kind of go into it. And then we're like, well, what are you here for? She's like, well, I'm here for a dentist expo or something like that. No clue what dentist expos do. But we were there. I had some time to kill. So we started asking her, like, what do you know about NFTs? Didn't know anything about anything. Didn't know what the word blockchain was. And, so again, it gave us an opportunity to try to explain this in a very simple way to somebody who didn't understand it. And one of the things that I find useful, again, is jumping into the deep end. So I told her, I said, look, what's your favorite picture? Like, if you were to look up a meme on the internet, what's your favorite meme? And she's like, it's this meme of a cat sitting on a couch. I was like, okay, here's my number. Text me the photo. So she texts me the photo. I take out my computer on the bar, open it up. I created a wallet for her and I minted her an NFT of that image. And I sent it to her and I said, congratulations, you have your first NFT. And she's like, okay, well, now what? And I'm like, well, this is a first step, right? Like, you understand you have ownership of this asset. She's like, but I can just go and I can find the image somewhere else. I could say that I have that too. Like, what's the difference of this? And I said, okay, well, here's where you're getting into the actual value proposition of the asset itself. Yes. And this is really what I wanted to leave the bar, stumble to the airport and fly home, kind of understanding that she grasped. And I said, it's not necessarily this image of a cat that's valuable. It's the ability to associate the code behind that linked to this particular contract as the actual value proposition. And she's like, oh, I still don't understand what you're talking. You're saying so many technical words. Like, can you just put it in plain English? And we're a bar full of people who are at CEX, right? So I stood up at the bar and I said, listen, I just minted this lady her first NFT. Whoever owns this NFT in the next 10 minutes will get a free round on me.
Oh,
instantly, I added value to her NFT. Now, they can go out and they can search for an image that's the same cat, but is it the NFT that will award them that beer? The answer is no. And at that moment, you can see that in that span of, call it an hour, somebody who had no clue what an NFT was understood what it could be.
When you convert to something you already know, like, this is a piece of paper, which means nothing other than it's the bill from my landscaper. If I go to the liquor store down the street to get my bottle of wine and I show them this piece of paper, it's like, oh, that's a pretty green piece of paper. But if this bill was printed on US Treasury paper and had picture of a president, now it has a monetary value to it. We're still all struggling with how to condense it down to make sense.
For anybody that's wanting to start a project, for somebody that has a business that wants to incorporate NFTs or Web3 technology into their actual application or their marketing strategies or their collaboration or their just overall technology advancement, you have a unique tool that you define day after day. Yeah. Imagine if I put out a TV commercial and a month from now I say, well, I wish I said it this way. You now have the ability to change that message. It's not going to cost you anything extra. Those assets are already in people's hands. Yep. Now you just basically have to say, hey, because you own this, because you believe in me and my project and my business, you are now awarded X, Y, and Z. So what are you doing? You're seeding the value of the investment that people bought into, right? So you're making it worthwhile, but indirectly, you're also increasing the value of that asset.
That's right.
Which makes it beneficial for the holder.
That's the demand aspect of this equation of the value that is developed through time, through process, through skills and talent, with creation and content, some creativity with how to make something valuable. You touched on so many things that, like, it's still new to me.
Well, we haven't even scratched the surface. I mean, you and I can go at this all day. And look, I don't care if it's an hour and a half or if it's 20 minutes at the end of the day. This has been an amazing conversation.
Can you share with people how to find you? If they're interested in Web3, how do they find you?
My business is called Your Ops Guy. So it's very simple, youropsguy.com. All my contact information is there. You'll see all the various aspects of business and operational business that I get myself involved in. Again, I'm doing a lot of this Web3 work, mostly with Food Fight Studios and John Briggs. He's becoming a very prominent pioneer in the space. He's gotten involved with quite a few pretty substantial influencers, and they pick his brain quite often about the use cases of NFTs and the use cases of Web3 technology. YourOpsGuy.com. On Twitter, YourOpsGuy, although I very rarely use social media platforms. I'm too busy working and building.
Yeah.
But feel free to reach out, send me an email. I mean, I'm very responsive, and if there's any specific questions, any specific projects, help with projects, always happy to help out.
Awesome. Mike, thanks so much. Really appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for educating us. Thank you for sharing all that you've putting it in perspective. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.